What happens when two of Hollywood's most unshakable forces collide on live TV, and no one would give in to anyone? When Meryl Streep, calm, composed, and razor-sharp beneath the surface, faces off against Whoopi Goldberg, fierce, fearless, and armed with the truth, the polite smiles vanish fast. What begins as an interview turns into open warfare, each question sharper than the last, each answer a counterstrike. What unfolds is a clash so raw left millions stunned, and the internet ablaze for weeks. Trust me, this talk show won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. That morning on The View, the energy felt different. The guest of honor that day is Meryl Streep. She'd come to promote her new film, a drama about truth and silence in a corrupt world. The applause hit as she walked into the studio. Meryl smiled, waved lightly, that polished charm she'd perfected after decades in the spotlight. The host greeted her with warm smiles and friendliness. Sitting in the middle of the table was Whoopi Goldberg. She isn't a stranger to controversy, no fan of half answers. She'd built her career on being blunt, calling people out when no one else would. To her, this wasn't just an interview, it was a test. Whoopi didn't rise to greet her. She stayed seated, leaning back in her chair, glasses low on her nose, lips curved in that sly half-smile that had humiliated more than a few guests before. "Well, look who finally decided to join us," she said, half joking, half jabbing. Meryl's brows arched slightly. "I wasn't aware there was a curfew," she replied smoothly, taking her seat. The audience chuckled, nervously. Just that brief exchange of less than 5 seconds was enough to sense the tension inside the studio. "Welcome to The View, Meryl," Whoopi said, tone sweet but eyes sharp. "You've been called the conscience of Hollywood for decades. But some people wonder, how can the conscience of Hollywood stay quiet when the world's on fire?" That landed like a slap dressed as a question. Meryl didn't flinch. She adjusted the sleeve of her jacket, looked Whoopi straight in the eye and said, "Sometimes the loudest people in the room are the ones doing the least." I've never needed to scream to make a point. Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table, her grin tightening. "Sure, but silence doesn't fix anything either. You can't stay quiet and then claim the moral high ground after the battle's over." Meryl's tone dropped, calm, low, deadly. "And shouting after it's over doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you late to the truth." The crowd gasped, a ripple of shocked laughter and soft "oh damns" moving through the seats. One of the other hosts tried to jump in. "Ladies, maybe we should—" But Whoopi raised a hand. "No, let her talk," Whoopi said, still staring Meryl down. "I'm curious. You say you speak through your work, but when women in this industry were begging for voices like yours, where were you? Writing speeches for your acceptance awards?" Meryl's smile disappeared completely. Her voice went cold. "Where was I? In rooms you wouldn't dare walk into, fighting battles no one put on camera." Whoopi laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. "Battles behind closed doors don't mean much if no one knows they happened." Meryl leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "They mean everything to the people I helped." "Not everyone fights for applause, Whoopi. Some of us fight for results." The air in the studio turned heavy. No music, no chatter, just two women staring at each other across the table like rival generals. Whoopi broke the silence first, voice lower now, almost taunting. "You talk about results, but the world remembers who stood up, not who whispered in the hallway." Meryl shot back without blinking. "Maybe that's because the world prefers noise over truth." A few audience clapped, then stopped when Whoopi's gaze cut toward them. The host leaned back, smirking. "You really believe that, huh?" "I know it," Meryl said. "And I also know this. Some of the loudest voices in this town use volume to cover their guilt." For a split second, Whoopi froze. The jab had landed. She recovered quickly, but her smile had vanished. "Careful," she said softly. "You're not the only one with stories." Meryl's eyes didn't move. "Then tell them. Just make sure they're true cameras, zoomed in, split-screening their faces." Meryl calm but deadly, Whoopi unflinching but visibly tightening her jaw. The moderator finally tried to cut in, voice trembling. All right, ladies, maybe we can start with the film. But it was too late. The line had already been crossed. The smiles were gone. The calm, whatever it had been, was officially over. The small talk was over. The smiles were fading. What started as a friendly interview had turned into a confrontation. Everyone could feel it. The shift, the tightening air. And then Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked like she was about to draw a blade. Do you really think silence changes anything? She asked, voice flat but cutting, the kind of tone that doesn't leave space to dodge. Meryl took a slow breath, blinking once before answering. Sometimes silence protects people who can't speak yet. Whoopi gave a quiet laugh. Low, sharp, humorless. Or maybe it just protects your image. The room went still. The audience froze mid-breath. Cameras caught the faint twitch in Meryl's jaw, a tiny fracture in that legendary calm. Meryl's voice stayed soft, but it carried the chill of someone done being polite. You've made a career out of judging everyone else's silence, Whoopi. Maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Whoopi's grin thinned. At least I never hid behind art while the world was burning. The audience gasped, that mix of shock and thrill that only live TV can deliver. One person whispered, "Oh my God," while another half laughed, not sure if they should. Meryl leaned forward, eyes hard now, every word landing like glass hitting tile. Maybe that's because the world never trusted you to lead the conversation. That line hit like a crack of thunder. Whoopi's smile fell away completely. She sat back, staring at Meryl, eyes narrowed. You really want to go there? Meryl didn't blink. We're already there. A hush fell over the studio. One of the producers off camera mouthed, "Cut to break," but the director didn't move. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Raw, unscripted, dangerous. Whoopi tilted her head, voice dropping lower, colder. You've built a whole image out of grace and restraint, Meryl. But maybe restraint is just fear in a fancy suit, Meryl shot back instantly. And maybe loud isn't brave. Maybe it's just desperate. A single ooh rolled through the audience like thunder. The camera zoomed in. Meryl's hands were still, her eyes sharp. Whoopi's jaw tightened, her fingers drumming against the desk. Two legends, both unyielding. The moderator tried to speak. Let's move on to the movie. But no one was listening. Meryl and Whoopi were past that now. This wasn't about the movie anymore. This was personal, and everyone in that studio knew it. They were watching the calm burn down, one sentence at a time. The conversation was supposed to be about Meryl's new film, about courage, truth, and art. But nobody in that studio was fooled anymore. They weren't talking about movies. They were talking about each other. Whoopi leaned in first, voice laced with that familiar mix of sarcasm and edge. People needed you, she said, and you gave them metaphors. Meryl's jaw tightened. She didn't hesitate. And people needed you, she shot back, and you gave them monologues. The audience reacted instantly. A low hum of gasps, nervous laughter, shifting seats. Cameras zoomed tight on their faces. Meryl's eyes sharp as glass. Whoopi's lips pressed into a thin line. The tension was alive, crawling across the table. You could see the tiny details. A bead of sweat glistening on Meryl's hand as she steadied her coffee mug. The twitch of Whoopi's fingers against the desk, her nails tapping like a countdown. Then Whoopi's tone changed, louder now, cracking through the air. You talk about art like it's a shield. But when people were screaming for help, you stayed quiet. You call that courage? Hiding in roles while others risked everything? The room froze. That one hit hard. Even the other hosts went still. Meryl leaned forward, slow, deliberate. When she spoke, her voice didn't rise. It dropped, each word slicing clean through the air. I risked it, she said, before you even got the microphone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It vibrated. Someone in the front row whispered, "This is history," barely audible, but it carried. Whoopi blinked, stunned for half a second, long enough for Meryl to take back control of the moment. The table between them felt smaller now, the space charged like a storm cloud. Meryl continued, voice steady. I fought those fights when no one was clapping. when it cost me work, when there were no hashtags, no applause, no talk shows to spin it. Whoopi leaned back, glaring, but Meryl didn't stop. You can call it silence if you want. I call it surviving. The audience was dead quiet. No one moved, no one coughed. Even the cameras seemed afraid to make a sound. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Two icons, two legacies, separated by one table and a lifetime of difference. And then, almost imperceptibly, Whoopi's hand came down hard on the table. Thud. The sound cracked through the silence like lightning. But Meryl didn't flinch. She simply looked up, unblinking, her expression calm but dangerous. The kind of calm that tells you the fight isn't over. And in that heavy silence, everyone watching, in the studio and at home, knew the truth. Something had just broken. Not the table, not the show. Something deeper. Something that wouldn't be fixed when the camera stopped rolling. The fire had burned through the surface. Both women sat quieter now, but the silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of exhaustion after too many blows. The air was thick with something raw, almost human. Meryl's voice softened, but every word carried the weight of decades. I turned down films that disrespected women, she said, eyes fixed on the table but voice steady. I walked off sets where power was abused. You didn't see that because you only see the noise. Whoopi didn't smile this time. Her tone was low, measured, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. And silence lets monsters live longer. That line hung in the air like smoke. The audience didn't clap. No one dared. It wasn't entertainment anymore. It was confession. Meryl looked up, her eyes cold and clear. And shouting makes them louder. It was like two storms colliding, one roaring, one whispering, both deadly. They weren't enemies, not exactly. They were two sides of the same wound, fighting over how to stop the bleeding. The camera zoomed in close, and for the first time you could see it, not rage but hurt, carved deep into both their faces. Whoopi leaned back, her lips parted like she wanted to fire back but couldn't find the words. Her fingers tapped the desk once, then stopped. The studio had gone completely silent. Even the lights seemed dimmer. Then came Meryl's next line. Quiet, trembling slightly, but it hit harder than anything before. Do you think I never cried for the people I couldn't save? The room froze. You could hear someone in the back sniffle, maybe even gasp. Whoopi looked down at the table, her tough expression cracking for just a moment. No witty comeback, no snide remark, just silence. And in that silence, for the first time, the audience didn't see two women fighting. They saw two women scarred, one who shouted her pain, one who buried it, both paying the same price in different ways. The camera lingered, pulling tight on their faces. Meryl's steady gaze, Whoopi's flicker of doubt, before cutting to black for commercial. But nobody in that studio moved. They were still holding their breath, realizing that this wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. The air was thick enough to choke on. Every word now carried the weight of a blade. The moderator, pale and visibly nervous, tried to steer the train wreck back onto its tracks. All right, let's move on to your new film, she began, forcing a brittle smile. Whoopi didn't even glance her way. She raised her hand, voice cutting through like a gavel. No, let's finish this. The crowd gasped, half thrilled, half horrified. You could feel the ripple move through the audience, 1,000 eyes locked on the two women who refused to blink. Meryl let out a faint, humorless laugh, adjusting her jacket. Of course, she said, voice dripping calm venom. You always need the last word. The tension exploded. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God!" loud enough for a mic to catch it. Cameras switched to a split-screen shot. Meryl, cold and composed, her jaw set like marble. Whoopi, fire in her eyes, shoulders forward, ready for the next strike. For a moment it felt like time stopped. You could almost hear their thoughts. Meryl thinking, she wants a fight, and Whoopi thinking, she's not walking away from this clean. Then Whoopi leaned in, voice sharp as broken glass. You talk about empathy, she said, but when the storm came, where were you? Meryl didn't blink. Her reply came quiet, steady, lethal. In rooms you'd never survive in. That single line landed like a silent explosion, the kind that doesn't need volume to destroy everything in its path. Whoopi froze, just for a second. Her eyes flickered, a crack in the armor. She wasn't used to someone hitting her back with words that calm. The audience didn't know what to do. Clap, gasp, or just keep breathing. Some leaned forward. Others looked around, like witnesses to something too real for daytime TV. Whoopi tried to recover, forcing a smirk. Is that supposed to scare me? Meryl met her gaze, unwavering. No, she said softly. It's supposed to remind you that not all battles are fought on camera. That was it, the quiet, devastating punch that flipped the whole room. The moderator's eyes darted from one to the other, unsure whether to cut to commercial or pray. The cameras caught every flicker, the fury behind Whoopi's grin, the iron stillness in Meryl's stare. And just like that, it was no longer a talk show. It was a standoff. And the audience knew it. The tension had reached a point where no one expected calm again. Both women sat still, their faces lit by the harsh studio lights. Two battle-worn soldiers in a war neither had planned for. The moderator didn't dare interrupt this time. She knew something was coming. You could feel it. The crowd leaning forward, the air heavy with anticipation. Then Meryl spoke, her voice low but cutting through the silence like glass. There's something I've never said publicly, she began. The audience hushed instantly. Whoopi tilted her head, skeptical but curious. Meryl continued, her tone steady but her throat tight with emotion. Years ago, a young actress came to me during a shoot. She was 20, maybe younger. She told me a producer, a man everyone feared, had cornered her. She thought her career was over if she spoke. I told her I'd take care of it. You could hear a pin drop. Even Whoopi's expression softened. I went to the studio, Meryl went on. I told them if he stayed, I'd walk. No press, no drama, no headlines. I just walked out of the room and waited. 2 days later, he was gone, and she got to finish that film. Her voice wavered, just for a heartbeat, then hardened again. He vanished. She thrived. That's all that mattered. Someone in the crowd let out a quiet sob. Another person clapped, just once. And then others joined in until the entire audience was on their feet. It wasn't wild applause, it was raw, grateful, real. Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table, her tone different now. Softer, but still questioning. Why didn't you tell that before? Meryl looked at her, eyes glinting under the lights. Because it wasn't my story to tell. That line landed like thunder. The applause roared back, louder this time, echoing through the studio as if the building itself understood what had just happened. Even Whoopi couldn't hide it, the flicker of something between respect and regret crossing her face. She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, lips pressed, thinking. Finally, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. Maybe I judged too soon. Meryl didn't smile. Her reply came slow, deliberate. Or maybe I waited too long. The two women locked eyes. No glare, no grin, just a quiet acknowledgement that neither one had won, but both had finally been heard. The camera zoomed in on that moment. Whoopi leaning forward, Meryl holding her gaze. Two voices that had spent years at odds finally meeting in the middle. And yet, even as the applause faded and the lights softened, everyone in that studio, and everyone watching at home, could feel it. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The storm had calmed, but something in the air said it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The applause from Meryl's revelation hadn't even died down when Whoopi leaned back, exhaling slowly. You could see her gears turning, weighing what had just been said against everything she'd fought for. The studio felt electric again. Not because of hostility this time, but because everyone knew one more round was coming. The final one. Whoopi leaned forward, her tone calm but heavy, each word deliberate. You fought in the dark, she said. I fought in the light. Meryl looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. And both of us got burned. The audience reacted before they could stop themselves. Someone in the back shouted, "That's real!" And the rest murmured in agreement. It wasn't a clap this time. It was a reaction to truth. Whoopi let out a soft, almost weary laugh, shaking her head. Maybe today, she said, voice dropping lower. We fight in the same room. The line hit differently, not as a jab, but as an understanding. For the first time that morning, both women sat still, breathing the same silence. 1 second, 2. That brief pause carried the weight of 2 entire careers. Decades of pride, mistakes, victories, and scars. Then Meryl broke it. Her tone turned sharper again, but it wasn't anger. It was precision. You crave noise, she said, eyes fixed on Whoopi. Whoopi smirked, leaning forward. And you fear it. Meryl didn't blink. No, she said quietly. I mastered it. The crowd gasped, a mix of awe and disbelief. Cameras zoomed in, locking on their faces. You could see the emotion behind the words now. Not rivalry, but raw honesty. Then came the final line, Meryl's voice low, steady, echoing through the silence that followed. Sometimes the quietest roar changes the world. The words hung in the air, powerful, unforced. For a long second, nobody moved. Then the entire studio rose to their feet. Applause thundered, wave after wave, shaking the walls. Whoopi sat back, half smiling, half stunned, while Meryl simply lowered her eyes. Calm again, composed, but different. The storm was over. As the lights softened, the camera panned out. 2 women, 2 legacies, and 1 truth hanging between them. That change doesn't belong to the loud or the silent alone, but to those brave enough to face each other and still stand. By the time the studio lights dimmed, the internet had already caught fire. Clips of the confrontation flooded social media within minutes. Cut, spliced, slowed down, captioned. Every look, every pause, every line turned into a moment. Number Meryl versus Whoopi, number quiet power, number loud voices, all trending within the hour. TikTok lit up with edits of Meryl's calm defiance. Twitter, or X, was a war zone of opinion threads. Whoopi was right. Silence is complicity. Meryl's restraint was power. That's what grace under fire looks like. Even CNN ran a segment titled, Hollywood's Cold War Just Went Live. Every major outlet dissected the exchange like a political debate. Entertainment journalists replayed the "you crave noise" moment frame by frame. YouTube reaction channels broke down every stare, every inflection. Within 24 hours, the clip had crossed 20 million views. It wasn't just viral, it was historic. In the days that followed, both women stayed silent, at least publicly. Then on the 3rd morning, Meryl posted a short message on her official page. No photo, no press statement, just 1 line. Sometimes silence is work being done. An hour later, Whoopi reposted it with her own addition. Sometimes silence is courage disguised. That simple exchange reignited the internet all over again. Comment sections turned reflective. What started as a feud had become a mirror. For the industry, for women watching, for anyone who'd ever been told their voice was too quiet or too loud. Weeks later, both were invited to speak at the Women in Film Gala. The first time they'd share a stage since that day. The audience held its breath when they walked out together. No script, no cue cards, just 2 icons standing side by side. Not as rivals, not as friends, but as survivors who'd learned to coexist inside the same storm. If you love this showdown, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and let us know your take in the comments. Turn on the bell so you don't miss the next jaw-dropping moment from TV's wildest talk shows. Because trust me, the next one is going to explode.